Hello, welcome back as we continue to talk about the sexual aspect of your marriage. In our last topic, we discussed the importance of maintaining the emotional and the physical connection. And in this topic, we're just going to move right along and we're going to talk about some pitfalls to avoid, things to avoid when the distractions come to disconnect you. The enemy is going to do his best and throw absolutely every and anything he can your way to disconnect you. And so there's some things we want to look out for when we are considering maintaining our connection and being hot and holy and being connected as a couple. So the first thing I really want to help you to understand is that the very thing that brought you together, the enemy will try and use that to separate you. Like he will try and use your personality, your character, the things that you first loved about one another. He'll begin to try and use those things. And so one of the keys that we want to remember is to be on the offense. We want to be on the offense and not have to always play from the side of the defense, always having to come back. And so if we live in the lane of offense, then we're always on guard and we're always prepared. We don't walk around being afraid of the enemy, but we want him to know who he's dealing with and that we will not have these things distracting or destroying our marriages. Okay. Excuse me. So the very first pitfall that I want to talk about is the pitfall of unforgiveness. Unforgiveness is going to rise up and because issues are going to happen. Feelings are going to get hurt no matter how much we love one another and no matter how much we try, something always happens where we have to forgive someone. And so that's the first pitfall is unforgiveness. One way to make sure that we don't fall into this is to live in the lane of forgiveness. And something to understand about forgiveness is we don't have the capacity to forgive the person because that's what Jesus did when he died on the cross. And so what we are actually forgiving are the offenses. We're forgiving the actions and the behaviors that have offended us and that have hurt us. And so we have to understand that first and foremost is you're going to have to do what Matthew chapter 18 verses 21 and 22 talks about when you have to forgive 7 times 70 each and every day. That's about 490 if I can multiply correctly. That's about 490 times a day, which we are held liable for forgiveness. Okay. And that's a lot of forgiving. The truth is actions do hurt. Offensive words hurt. We can't get around that. But if you live in the lane of let me practice forgiving these offenses and these things that happen to me, you won't grow into bitterness, anger, rage, and you won't disconnect completely. Okay. One thing that I want to encourage you to do is forgive on a regular basis, but this is how I want you to do it. I forgive and then state the actual offense of what it is you are forgiving. Okay, I forgive. You can state your husband or your wife's name and then the offense, state the offense and allow yourself to feel that emotion, go through the emotion so that it drops off of you. Okay, you have to allow yourself to experience that emotion so that it can actually drop and then you can be in a place where you can receive the healing and allow God to heal you because the healing is going to come from God. If you practice this on a regular basis, yep, you're going to have attitudes, you're going to get mad, but you should not disconnect if you live in the lane of forgiveness. Okay, so we want to avoid unforgiveness as the very first one. The next thing a pitfall we want to avoid is rejection. Rejection, it's the sneaky little stealth spirit that comes in marriages that it just kind of comes in sometimes undetected. And it starts off very, very innocent. Hey, do you want to do this together? No, I don't feel like it. Well, that's a rejection. Hey, would you like to go here? I don't want to go there. Hey, can we do this? I don't want to do that. Every time those rejections start off very small, but they constantly build and they build on top of each other. So we have to be careful of constantly rejecting our spouse's invitations to things. And if you're the one that is doing the rejecting, if your spouse is constantly asking for something or wanting to do things and it's constantly a no, 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 you're going to have to be you're the one that's responsible for re-inviting. Okay. And then being patient with your spouse, knowing that this doesn't, this is not easy to get over because you have done it so many times. And so rejection, that plays a part into why, I don't want to have sex right now. I don't want to do this right now. Now I don't feel like it. I'm tired. Those are rejections. And so if if it continues, then your spouse is one of you are going to get to the place where, well, I'm not even going to ask anymore. It just is what it is. And then there's the divide. There's the disconnect that we want to avoid. And so if you are the one who finds yourself in the place where you are doing the rejecting, you're going to be the one that's responsible for re-inviting, resending the invitation, and letting your spouse know that they are welcome. Okay. And so that's how you're going to end up combating that and fighting that devilish spirit that's going to come in to disconnect. So you want to avoid rejection. All rejection is not bad. Okay. So sometimes that a no has to be a no. But when it comes to sex, you should talk about if the answer is no on a constant and a consistent basis. And just remember that there is an importance in maintaining the frequency when we're talking about sex. Okay, so we want to make sure that we don't constantly have rejection happening between the two of us, okay, in our marriage. Another pitfall is having unrealistic expectations of one another, expecting your spouse to function, to respond, to act, and maneuver the way that you would. That is going to set you up for disconnection, frustration, rejection, and unforgiveness. Okay, you see how they all just kind of come together. And so we want to avoid having unrealistic expectations of one another, allowing one another to be the individuals that you are. Okay, and whatever these expectations that you've come into the marriage with, you might want to really do some review and find out what really is entailed in marriage. I expect my wife to always initiate sex, or I expect him to always initiate sex. Those are unrealistic. Sometimes you might not feel like it. And if you absolutely want to have sex, then you should say what it is that you want and what it is that you desire, simply because we're not mind readers. And you're not expected to read one another's mind. And so if you're not getting the satisfaction that you need when it comes to sex, you should ask yourself, have I had realistic expectations? Have I communicated or even just let my spouse know what it is that I'm looking for, what it is that I desire? So having unrealistic expectations will definitely cause a divide and a disconnect. So you want to avoid that pitfall. That is a pitfall from the enemy to separate you. Okay, so don't have unrealistic expectations. Another one that pitfall you want to avoid is having unhealthy conversations. A lot of people call it we don't communicate. Well, we all communicate, and whether we're communicating in a positive manner or whether we're communicating in a negative manner, we're all communicating. Our attitudes communicate, our body language communicates, our facial expressions communicate. We're always sending some kind of message. And so the pitfall I want you to consider avoiding is having unhealthy conversations where the conversations are filled with blame, pointing of the fingers, always defensive, and fighting one another, not coming together on mutual bounds and understanding and just having something that is beneficial. So you want to avoid having unhealthy conversations. This is going to require learning communication tools, healthy and proper and appropriate communication tools. It's going to require you being intentional about talking and conversing with one another about all aspects of your marriage, but especially and very importantly about sex, okay? Because we come in just having unhealthy conversations and, you don't do this right, and I don't like when you do this. Well, if there's something you would like for your spouse to get better in, there's a way to communicate that. Okay. And you should really, really consider scheduling these different times for conversations, because doing it while you're driving down the street, having that conversation, if you're on your way somewhere, it will throw you off for wherever it is you're trying to go. Having that conversation before you're getting ready to go to work or before you're getting ready to have a presentation or whatever it is you need to do will completely throw you off. Having that conversation when it's time for dinner, that'll spoil your appetite, just completely kill it. Okay. So you want to create space in your marriage so that you can have these conversations and make sure that they are healthy. Hey, can we have this conversation about sex? There's some things that I would like to discuss. and making sure that you understand that delivery and tone and all of those different things play a very important part of conversating and having healthy communications. Okay, so make sure you learn some healthy communication skills so that you can have healthy conversations. Okay, another pitfall that we want to avoid is turnoffs. So let's talk about this for a moment. The very thing that drew you together in the first place, if we're not careful, those things will become turnoffs. But here are some turnoffs that I want to make sure that we think about. Having bad attitudes is a complete turnoff, whether it's the man having a bad attitude or the woman having a nasty attitude. Those are turnoffs, okay? So we want to make sure that our attitudes are constantly in check. If we are turned off, then not only are we turned off mentally and emotionally, we are turned off physically, and our bodies will not do what it is we want them. They won't respond the way we want them to respond. Being broke, having financial problems is a turn off. Okay, not being a provider, for the man, if you're struggling to be a provider and it's a constant thing, it's okay if things come up unexpectedly and you don't have any control over, you get through those things together. But constantly and there's no effort being made, that is a complete turn off. Addictions are a turn off. Being mean and fussing, those are turnoffs. Being lazy and unmotivated, those things are turnoffs, and we don't really seem to think about it, but they are turnoffs. Being unhealthy, having no goals, not helping in the marriage, being unsupportive of what your spouse is doing, that is a huge turnoff. Not taking care of your body. And again, these facial expressions and our attitudes, being unspiritual. If you're married to, or you're getting married to someone who loves Jesus and they are just very spiritual, and then you come along, or one of you is not spiritual, you guys are unbalanced with this, that is going to be a turnoff and something that you're going to have to try and figure out how to work through. I really recommend staying connected to someone who can help you navigate through that. Being uninterested, being unenthused, okay, and also being holier than thou, then that is a turnoff as well. So I don't want to leave it on one end saying that somebody is unspiritual, because if someone is just way overly spiritual, then that can become a turnoff as well. And so we want to make sure that we're balanced in our spirituality and being healthy, taking care of our physique, taking care of our bodies. If we don't, then that is a turnoff. It really is a turnoff. Being untrusting, being insecure and nagging, those are things that are turn offs. Being overcrowding, okay, you just can never give somebody some space. You just, it's okay that we have time together, but it's also okay if we're not doing absolutely everything together. So we want to be careful and avoid these different pitfalls. We don't seem to think about that up front, but these are major turnoffs, okay? And when we're turned off, I promise you, when you are turned off and somebody has made you mad, the last thing on your mind is letting your bodies come together and connect. And so if you're not careful, then the enemy will use all of these different ungodly attributes and ungodly behaviors and attitudes to disconnect you. So please avoid the pitfall of turning one another off. It's not going to be unavoidable, but you don't want to live in there. You do not want to live in, I'm always being turned off because I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Discuss these different things and talk about, I was unhappy with, this is how I felt when this happened. This is how I felt when this happened. You want to avoid being turned off. Okay. And I think the last one is just pretty much like life's obstacles. We cannot avoid life. We cannot avoid the obstacles in life, but we cannot allow these obstacles to disconnect us. We should have a plan going forward when different things come up. If there are no children in the marriage up front, then you should prepare for when children come. Talk about how you're going to need each other's support, how you're going to need each other's help, and try to come up with a plan. And be open to changing the plan as necessary. Just because it's written in stone doesn't mean that it should not be able to be erased. I say write in pencil, not in pen, so that things can be erased and adjusted as needed. Because as life continues, then you are going to have to adjust. You are going to have to continue to adjust so that life obstacles do not become a pitfall for you. Children, careers, health, all of these different things that we're not going to be able to avoid. do not mean that they have to separate us. Okay. So be attentive to what is trying to disconnect you, and stay prayed up about your marriage, because these pitfalls, they are coming whether you like it or not. There's no way to avoid life. There's no way to avoid hurt feelings. There's no way to avoid rejection. There's no way to avoid them, but you can avoid allowing it to disconnect you. You can avoid them tearing your marriage apart. And that's what I mean by avoiding the pitfalls, these pitfalls that we want to avoid. Avoid allowing them to tear you apart, because you want to remain together and connected as much as you possibly can. And then you want to utilize the tools when problems do come about, so that you can get reestablished and reconnected. Okay. All right. So avoid those pitfalls and make sure you do what it is that you can to stay connected. Okay, I'm coming back with a few more topics. The next ones are going to be a little bit more lively and fun. So I hope you will join me. Thank you so very much for coming back to this topic.